Welcome, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well today. My name is Drew Tucker, and I am the Director of Jazz at South Arts. It's an honor to be here at this webinar to kick off this next iteration of Jazz Road. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I hope everyone can see me all right. Basically, the plan for today is to give sort of a big picture overview of what Jazz Road is, for those of you who aren't familiar, and also to give a walkthrough of the application process to maybe demystify it for some. The first thing I want to say is a big thank you to everyone who's been so key and instrumental to putting together and launching this Jazz Road initiative. We're going to get into thanking some of those larger donors soon, but just the in-house here at South Arts, we have Ivan Shustak, who's our Director of Communications, Kathy Lee, Joy Young, and all the rest of the staff who've really been instrumental in helping this get off the ground. It's no small. Hopefully we have a mixture of artists, agents, just people who are interested, maybe even who have friends who are jazz artists. And so the goal of this grant is really to help everyone and to really help the jazz field as a whole. But we're going to get into that. So first off, who am I? My name is Drew Tucker. I just started here as Director of Jazz. It's an absolute honor to be able to sort of be a part of the team that's helming this really cool vehicle to help push this forward. And just so you guys know, I've spent my lifetime being a musician. I am a jazz artist myself. I do play the vibraphone. There's a couple pictures, some different shows I've been on. I have toured quite extensively, both with my own groups and with other groups. And I also was in the nonprofit management world since 2011. I started a theater in South Arts Garage, and then became the cultural arts director of the city of Pompano Beach before getting right back into music and teaching. Even my child, as you can see up there, maybe if you can see that picture, my child is now having her own career at 18 years old playing. So not only what was the old adage of not only the haircut president, so a client. So I'm not only here in the arts administration role, but I'm also somebody who has actually applied for this grant. Started the application for this grant at the beginning of this year, which is how I found out about this job. So I've been on both sides of this equation. So it's really, I have a unique perspective. And so, like we mentioned, there are people to thank. We definitely want to thank the foundation, and the Mellon Foundation. Those are the funders of the Jazz Road. The Jazz Road program is a national program that's helmed by, but we do it in conjunction with our RAOs, or regional arts organizations. We call them RAOs, and there's a few of them. There are 6 total, including us. There's South Arts, of course. There's Mid-America Arts Alliance. There's the Western State Arts Foundation. There's Arts Midwest. There's New England for the arts, and there's Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation as well. So we have those. So Jazz Road, what is it essentially? Well, Jazz Road is made up of 2 parts. The first part is the Jazz Road Creative Residencies. And what that is grants of up to $40,000 that basically help support projects that you would, whether it be merging jazz with other types of music, other types of people, putting jazz in new spaces, perhaps creation of music, creation of videos. Kind of the sky's the limit in terms of how you can use to support your creative endeavor. So it's really cool. That's going to launch mid-January. And then, of course, you have the second part of it, which is the Jazz Road Tours, which most of you are here for today. And that's grants of up to $15,000, supporting multi-town tours by jazz artists to connect with new audiences around the nation. And there's no mistake that we use the word town instead of city, because city sort of implies urban centers, places where the population is high. And usually in those urban centers, you find a lot of jazz. Whereas in towns, townships, rural areas, you don't. And a large part of what the road is about is bringing jazz to those who don't have as much access to jazz. So we're going to talk about the Jazz Road Tours. Again, this grants up to $15,000 that are going to support these tours. And these tours are tours that are meant to help, again, diffuse jazz throughout the country, especially where possible, where jazz wasn't as prevalent before, underserved areas, rural areas. So, what's the goal of Jazz Road Tours? Well, it's to do our part to improve the state of the jazz field through the support of independent artists. So, we do that in two ways. One of the ways that we do that is by funding tours up to 15,000, what I mentioned, and also through educational and professional development for artists. And the way that we do that part is still evolving. We're still adding more and more offerings to be able to do that, but we want to do that simply through the process of applying for this grant. We're well aware that artists of many different types, at many different types of levels, many different types of points in their career, will apply for this grant. But that also includes some who are emerging, and we want to make the idea of touring more accessible for those emerging artists as well. And also we want to give them the tools that they would need, tools that if you've been on the road a while, or if you've gone out on the road, you know that maybe you had to learn the hard way. I know personally I had to learn about certain budgetary or certain expenses that I hadn't really accounted for when I started touring. And then, by the second or third tour, after barely breaking even on when you're like, okay, well, maybe I wish I would have thought about really how far this was, or how much money I was losing by not staying home. Was it even worth it to go out on tour? What did we gain? What were the real benefits? So even by just going through the application process, we hope that all artists, but especially those who are emerging or those who are really building their career, will be able to get some tools and be able to think about things in the ways that they need to think about it to form a successful tour. So what does that mean for you, hearing the goals of Jazz Road Tours? Why is that important for you to understand what we're trying to accomplish here at South Arts? Well, you should keep this in mind, and you should really let it guide your choices in terms of how you make your application, where you decide to play, what venue to look for. If we're trying to build the jazz field at South Arts, and that's one of our goals, and we're trying to permeate jazz throughout the nation, particularly where jazz may not be as accessible to people in underserved communities and in rural areas, then when you're thinking about where you're going to tour, understand that if your goals align with the goals of the grant, that's going to be more competitive, right? So when you're thinking about it, if you're going to say, well, I can't wait to play at Blues Alley, for example, then I'm going to head up to Smalls, then I'm going to go to Village Vanguard, and we're going to finish up over at Dizzy's at Lincoln Center. Great. And that'll be great for your career. As we look at it, maybe mixing some of those types of, and those are just for examples. Those are great venues, by the way. Some of those venues with other venues are maybe house parties, maybe community events, maybe something at a library where they would never have thought of having jazz. And that would take a little bit of extra legwork on your part, but those kinds of applications where it helps us to achieve the goals of the grant will make your application more competitive. It doesn't mean that those venues, those larger or more well-known venues, should be left off, but consider making sure that as you consider that, consider blending it with other spaces as well. All right, the grant cycles. When are the grant cycles? The first one is open now. It opened October 17th, and it closes on December 1st. That is a hard deadline. So if you don't have your grant in by December 1st, you can wait until the next cycle, which, as you can see, begins in January. Or you can wait till 2 cycles after that. But this grant cycle, rather, will close on December 1st. Then all the applications go to the panel. I am not on the panel, just so you know, as I do see all of the applications. I do my best to review the applications for accuracy, for completion. And we'll get into that a little bit more later about that process. But then once the applications go to the panel, I don't see them anymore, and I just get the results back after. We just get the results back here at South Arts. And so if you're applying now, October and December, your tour should be scheduled somewhere March 1st to September 15th. So if you have a tour planned for November of 2023, you should wait until the January cycle to apply. So the next cycle is January 3rd through March 1st. Those awards will be announced May 15th. Those tours, if you're applying in between January and March window, those tours should take place between June and January. Right now, same thing with April. So those are the ones that we have scheduled right now. As we go through each of these, as we hear the feedback from the field, from the jazz field, as we hear feedback from you, different ways that things worked, or perhaps as we look at as we analyze the data, we may make slight adjustments to that as we go on, but these are the ones that are out there right now. So as you're planning your tour, as you're thinking about tours maybe you already have that are already in process of being planned, keep in mind these dates when you're thinking about which ones to apply for. All right. The application. All right, so as we move into this application portion, I did some screen grabs of the application. They are going to be a little fuzzy for you, but I'm going to walk you guys through them. And of course, when you go through the application, you'll be able to hopefully you'll be able to make the connections of what we talked about here today. So hopefully you can see it, but if not, don't stress about it too much. I'm going to talk you through it anyhow. So the first page of the application is basic information. And I do want to say this as we go into this with these, all of this application process, it's really important that you're just as detailable. Obviously, when we talk about your name, being accurate with those things is important. As we continue to go through where you're like, well, how detailed should I err on the side of course, being more detailed. The more information we have about you, about your project, about what you're doing, the better the panel is going to be able to really understand what you're trying to accomplish. So we go through here, we have our address, we have social media links, we have the community type, which is basically what community are you from. It's a drop-down menu. So you want to make sure you pick that, like what community do you play for? Are you in an urban area? Are you from a rural area, etc. You have your website. There's a minor plug for my website. I'm the one who filled this application out, so you want to check that out. Same thing with your socials. If you don't have some socials, you don't have to put it. Like I know that maybe a lot of us might not have a LinkedIn. So about that. Any other social media you have. Then we get into demographic information. This is the demographic of here of the main person applying in your group. So the primary discipline will be music, whatever race or ethnicity. Your age range, your gender identity, how you identify, and these things, these here is really key to note, don't affect your application. So it's not like there's a ratio of certain ethnicities. This is just so that we can understand who is applying. We can understand what communities we may need to reach out to more in the future, so that we can make sure that everyone's getting an chance, like we have an equity of opportunity, so that everyone sees it. If we see that we're only getting a certain demographic, perhaps we're not getting enough African Americans, perhaps we're not getting enough Asian Americans, well, then we want to take a look at our marketing efforts, take a look at what we're doing on our side to make sure that it's an awareness issue, and if we can raise that awareness to make sure that we give everybody that equity of opportunity, that's really important to us. But don't think that any of those things are going to affect the rate or be considered with your application. Same thing with disability. Now at the bottom of this page, as at the bottom of every page, you're going to see this right here. It's going to say save, and it's going to say next. Please, please, please save. Press save. Please, before you go to each page, when you are at the bottom of a page, please, please press save. If you don't press save and you hit next, listen, just press at the end of each, just to be safe. All right, the next page of the app is your tour information. So your tour name, it's already kind of filled out there. It says Jazz Road Tours FY24, but if you have a tour name, it's even better. If you're marketing something, it's the whatever your album name is. Perhaps it's Johnny Walker and the Johnny Walker Reborn Tour. I just came up with that. But feel free to use it. It sounds kind of cool. So feel free to do that. The tour discipline will be music. That's one that you'll select. And then you'll music. There's one that says band. Just make sure you find the one that says jazz over there. And then the tour activity type, it would be a concert or a performance or a reading. Now, when we get into the tour start date, this is when your tour is starting. and the tour end date was when your tour would be ending. So the first day to the last day. Now your tour summary, I just copied and pasted there, but there's an example on the application of what that's looking for. So that might be something like, just kind of gives us a broad overview of what you're trying to do. So that specifically when I'm reviewing it, or when one of our team at South Arts is reviewing it, and if we see it says, my tour starts in New York and ends in New York, you're going to probably get an email that says, hey, if you could be a little more descript, because I'm, just if you could really just help us to appreciate where you're trying to go, what that route is, what's that 30,000 foot view, so to speak, so we can understand sort of the general range that you're trying to reach. So there's a good example there, and that can kind of help me sort of to know what to look for to make sure I can help you to be as successful when you're filling this out. All right, then we have the ensemble details. So here again, I just filled out my stuff. This was my test. The ensemble name here was Drew Tucker in the New Standard. The ensemble size, it was 5 people. And then when you get into, and side note, see up there above ensemble details, there's a list: ensemble details, venues, uploads, offer letters, tour details. It goes horizontally above that. Make sure that you fill out all of those. If you just scroll all the way down to the bottom, there might be a chance that you might miss something. So make sure you understand that underneath this category, there are those sort of subcategories that are at the top there that you want to make sure that you've filled out all of those. So here we have venues, and each one of these, this is the venue information. So you're going to fill out your venue information for all of the spaces. Now, sometimes we use the terms presenter and venue somewhat interchangeably. A venue is the physical space. Presenter is the organization or person that's presenting you. They oftentimes can be the same, but sometimes they're not. So perhaps your concert, it's a booking agency, or there's a person who books for several different venues. A presenter would be the venues, would be those various different venues. But oftentimes, like I said, they're the same person, especially if it's a location, a restaurant, something like that. So you have the name of the venue, where it's at, what are your travel dates to and for that to that venue. So you write when you're traveling to that venue, so we can see, and the goal of all of this information is very important to understand, because one of the one of the subcategories that your application will be looked at is what we like to call tour integrity. And what tour integrity means is this tour really viable? Is this something that is a strong tour that can be successful? So the goal of this is to keep you on the road. So it's not for one-offs. It is okay to have a day or two off, especially to allow for travel days, or to allow for slower days where a venue might not book, like a Monday. So if you have a Friday and a Saturday, Sunday, maybe the Monday and Tuesday might be off, but then you're playing Wednesday. Those things are understandable. But if you have 4, 5, 6 days off, it's going to make your tour look weaker by comparison, because either you're going back home, which will add unnecessary cost, or you're staying out and you're incurring more hospitality costs, and you're incurring more and more travel costs, food fees, per diems, etc. So we want to make sure that a tour has tour integrity. This goes right back to one of the areas we're trying to help the field, which is that education. So making sure that we help, especially those acts who are emerging, to understand that that's not a viable thing to do on a real tour, on any tour for that matter. Is really important. Apologize for the shaky cam. So we have that right there. Venues. Then we have offer letters. Now we're going to talk about offer letters a little bit later, but we provided some templates, or a template for an offer letter. And this is really kind of a key point. In the past, offer letters it was kind of you have to have the offer letter, and it has to be something that the venue offers. But we also realize that some venues don't offer letters, the template. So basically, I want to say this too: if you already have contracts, or if you're an agent, or your agent already has contracts are okay as well. You can upload a contract form; those work. But letter serves to make sure that you, as the artist, again going back to developing the artist, it goes back to you being able to ask the right questions and get the information that you need to have a successful tour. So there's a lot of questions on there. They don't all need to be answered. The main ones that we're looking for to make sure that you have a solid grasp on so that we can see the integrity of your tour is how much the venue is paying the artists, number one. Number two is any backline, and then the plus hospitality and travel. So those are the things that we're really looking for. So hospitality means food, any drink tickets, you know, lodging, or travel expenses, whether it's a per mile fee or they're paying for your flights. And then the backline, because if they're not providing backline and you're 250 miles away, are you traveling? Well, I can look and say, well, you didn't even put in here for a van or any sort of truck. You're just flying and you play the vibraphone. So what are you going to do when you get there? And so that should be something that is there inside of that information, and you can answer that within your expense justification as well. So, but again, if you have an email, you've been emailing back and forth, and the offer, the venue rather, is saying, yeah, sure, we'll do it. Here's our details. You can ask those details. You can fill in that offer letter. Just make sure you have confirmation from the venue or the presenter that they approve the details of that offer letter, and then you can upload it. Virtual signatures are fine, just to make sure that you are getting that information in. It's really as much for you as it is for us to make sure that the gig is legitimate and to make sure know the information you need to know. And then you learn the questions if you're in that situation or that point in your career where it's important that you know what to ask these venues so that we can build. Because again, we're trying to build a jazz field, and the way that we've chosen to build a jazz field has been through is through the individual artists. So I'm going to go back a few really quickly. One of the things I forgot, we went to ensemble details. I kind of skipped through a few here. Going on from ensemble details, you'll the primary state of residence, that's for the person applying. So wherever the main, if you guys were all rehearsing, where's the place you were going to fly into to rehearse, or where's the place you'd be? So here I put Georgia. Obviously, there's a lot of Drew Tuckers who play lots of instruments here. So I put a lot of, so you list the people who are on here. And then you have touring history. Now, as someone who's done this before, I don't remember which months. Like I know, for example, there was one tour in 2017. We went to Nashville and we went to Alabama. We played, and we went to New Orleans, and we played, I think, the Blue Nile that one, or we might have played Snug Harbor. I don't remember. You don't have to be that detailed. I'm not going to be calling the venues unless something looks fishy. But even then, we won't. We just want to see how much experience you have touring and seeing has been doing. So if you're like, well, in 2017, here's some venues we toured. Here's one of the tours. We did a tour of the Southeast. We did this. We did a tour of the Northeast. We toured through this place or this space, and we toured with this person. We opened, or we were a supporting act for this artist. Those are the things we want to see. We want to see those types of things. But if you don't remember the month and the day and what time you started and what time the next act was and what time sound check was, you don't have to worry about it. Upload your biography. And then the ensemble members' demographics. Again, this won't play into the acceptance. It's something that we want to see in terms of making sure that we understand the field and who's playing, and making sure that we're giving that we're seeing a lot of from a wide swath of demographic. Oh, and again, save, and then hit next. All right, so we have that one. The next one, all right, we're on venues. So when you look at venues, you have to have a minimum of 3. So there's a minimum options here for venues. And then when you get to the end, we have, or not to the end of each one, rather, there it asks what the venue is paying. And this is, or what the venue is offering, the equitable payment. When it says equitable payment, it's referring to how much they're paying. What's the honorarium? What's the salary? What are they paying you for the gig? That doesn't have to do with backline or hospitality or lodging or travel. What we're looking for is what are they offering? Now it could, if it's an all-inclusive deal, they could say, hey, we're offering $1,000 all-inclusive. So just put that in the mix. And then we want to know the difference between what you're asking is equitable pay versus what they're offering. And then to explain that. Now, this is really important. This difference doesn't affect your ask in terms of your grant request. We want your grant request to be the number up to 15,000 need to make this tour happen successfully, as though venues were paying. The reason why we want to see what venues are paying, the reason why we want to understand what you're asking for is so that we can understand the state of the jazz field. You're going to hear me say that quite a bit, so that we can understand what's going on. Someone hop in. I didn't hear. Oh, thought I heard. Oh, hey, Svetlana, we'll be with you in a minute. So that we can understand what the state of the field is. So don't think that because the venue's offering you 500 and you're asking for 2,500 that we're going to say like, whoa, wait a second, why would you need so much money? That's not the reason why we're asking for that information. Jazz musicians, artists deserve to get paid a living wage, deserve to make the money that they that's compensatory for how much they worked putting together a tour. A band leader who put together a tour, who made all the copies, who put together the Dropbox, who organized the rehearsal space, who yada 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 yada. Served as a social media consultant, served as the communications person, built the website, communicated with all the venues, deserves to be paid for the time as though you were hiring separate people to do it. So that's one of the reasons why when we go back and we talk about, well, what's your tour history? What have you done? That's the time that you mention those things so that we can look and say, okay, well, they're asking for 5,000 for this show, but look at this group. Then the panel can see that and say, well, that's justified. That's something that is known. And what a tragedy that they know this guy. They know whoever insert artist who's had a lengthy touring history here. They know this person, and at the same time, they're still trying to offer them $500 for their 4-piece band, for a 2-hour show. And well, wow, if we look at that area, that's kind of a pattern in that area. That's kind of a pattern at this time of year as we sort of look at all that demographic, and that'll help us to be able to make choices on how we can better serve the field in the future. The venue audience demographic. Why do you need to know that? How are you going to find that out? Ask. So, hey, who usually comes to your club? Oh man, we get a lot of mixed people, a lot of mixed ages. It could be young. 18 is the bottom. We usually 18 to 23. And that's important for you to know because it's important for you to know how you're going to market it, how you're going to get people to that show. For a career, you have to add value to the venues in which you're playing. You have to add presenters that you're playing with. And that's not just done with your music. If you show up and you've done in terms of understanding who comes to that venue, what the usual audience is for that venue, so you've done no effort in reaching out to them on the platforms that they use, it could be that we didn't even really see much out of you in terms of trying to support your own show. So we'd rather not have you. Listen, this is great to get a tour, to get $10,000 to go tour, but it's just $10,000 to go tour if you don't get asked back, because the goal of a tour is to then build that nucleus, right? Build that footprint. The footprint starts one place and then builds and builds and builds. So we want to make sure that you're asking the right questions to be able to do that. So that information is as much for you as it is for us. And again, you go back in the now, so you're looking at those demographics and what might be there. So then the next venue's there. So as we keep going through that, are there any other activities that you're going to be doing? What's the seating capacity? What's the ticketing structure? Do they ticket online? Do they do hard ticket to the door? I think you muted. Could you mute Svetlana? I shall. Thank you so much. Sorry. What's the seating capacity? And again, what's the equitable payment? Things such as that. All right, moving on. Then we have the offer letters. And there we go. You'll upload those for each venue. Easy to read and understand. Feel free to upload that here. You'll still enter the numbers here in the fields so that we can take a look at it. We also provided 2 different templates for you to use for budget. You can download them, adjust them how you want, and then upload those. Obviously, we try to make them as detailed as possible. And there's several different ways to budget your tour, especially when it comes to paying your musicians. It could be that you're doing a per diem. It could be that you're doing a per gig. It could be that you're adding food. It could be that it's all inclusive. Just make sure that that stuff is clear. And again, if you have a spreadsheet, please upload that as well. But you still fill in these fields anyhow. Work samples. Make sure that you upload the highest quality of work samples that you have. you can link to YouTube, you can link to Dropbox, you can link to Vimeo. There's a password. Make sure you push it. Make sure you put it, and make sure it's the highest quality that you have, so that we can get the best example of your work. Please, if you're applying for a 5-piece, using, even though your duo work sample might be great, it's not really applicable. Make sure you if you can, the optimal thing is to use the exact group that you're applying for. I understand obviously that groups change. So maybe you had Johnny's your drummer, Johnny Walker. There's Johnny Walker again. He's your drummer on the video, but he's off getting his PhD, so you have to use his brother Jimmy Walker, same talent, and so that's okay. But if you have drums, keys, guitar, bass, and saxophone, but the video is organ trio, and it's not representative, that wouldn't be great for your application. Here, the anything else. Take a second on the anything else, please. This is the part where you can really connect about your music, really connect about what this would mean to you, really connect about what you're trying to do, the kind of impact this could have. Anything that we didn't ask implicitly, this is kind of your open area. Because it's at the end of the grid, seems like a slight bit of a throwaway, but it's not a throwaway. This is a very important aspect of the application process, because this is where we sort of get to know you. We get to see you and just kind of understand how deep this is to you and what kind of impact it has. Listen, the goal of what we're trying to do here at South Arts, the goal with this grant, what Mellon is charging us to do, is to give away this money to support the jazz field, and we want to find the best candidates to be able to do that for. And by best, of course, has a lot to do with merit, but also has to do with those who understand how their vision matches up with the vision of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So, an opportunity here to really kind of share your soul a little bit, to share what the music means to you. We put this at a pretty high character limit, so feel free to pontificate. Also, you're not getting judged on grammar. Don't stress the grammar too much. As someone who has stressed the grammar too much on these apps, unless it's illegible or we can't read it, if you missed a comma, got a couple caps in there, a few spelling errors, the content is going to be much more important. So I'm here to say, just please don't stress that stuff out too much. Goal is going to be to give you guys as much feedback as possible. So again, depending on the applications per cycle, I may be able to, may be able to look over these and say, well, I think you need to do a little bit more on the tour summary, and we reach back out to you and open the application back up so you can do that before we submit it. It also matters how late you put in the grant. So the earlier you get the grant in, the more feed you have the opportunity to get. If you put the grant in on November 27th or November 28th, there's a high likelihood that it'll get a cursory overview, or it will get, and you won't really have the opportunity by the time you get feedback on it to submit it, to redo it. So unless there's something missing, if there's something missing, I'll do the best that I can to get it back to you, but I can't guarantee. And also, if you do not get it, you can expect to get a, hey, you didn't get it. But also you can expect to get some comments on some things that you can improve on for the next time, or a phone call or an email, so that you can improve for the next grant. If you have won a grant, you can apply for another Jazz Road Tours grant a year after your final grant. I'm sorry, a year after your tour ended, you can apply for another Jazz Road Tours grant. Also, if you have applied, understand the panel that's adjudicating now will be fresh panel. They wouldn't have seen your last application. So it won't have too much bearing unless the numbers are out of control. You'll be as competitive as long as the application is sound. And just so you know, if you are planning on applying for a Jazz Road residency, you're like, oh, I don't know which one, you can apply for both. Panels will be totally different. The panel Jazz Road residency will not know that you applied for and or won a Jazz Road tour. So if you apply for this Jazz Road tour and you get the tour, and then you apply for the residency in January, that panel won't say, well, they applied for the tour, let's put them at the bottom of the pile. They're going to look at it on its own merit judge the application, judge the project, and be able to award it. And you can win a tour and a residency in the same cycle. So yeah. So now what I wanted to do is I wanted to invite Svetlana, who's a former Jazz Road Tour winner. Actually, let me see here. I think I may have one more. Oh yeah, who's a former Jazz Road Tour winner. And Svetlana, you there? There you are.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, how are you?
How you doing? How are you?
What are you up?
I'm great.
What are you up to right now? Where are you in this country of ours?
Well, I am in Fort Myers, Florida, currently hogging the office of a host of a Florida Professor Robertson, who is a professor at the Florida Gulf State University. We're told that hurricane is coming. We've been here touring for a week and giving master classes to students at the university and also in high school. Kind of like a perfect, actually, Jazz Road type tour, except it was not for Jazz Road, but now kind of figuring out if we can get out of here and even have a concert tonight. So let's see.
Well, Svetlana, I'll tell you, as a South Florida native, living there for a lot of time, we don't get out of bed for less than a category 3, so you should be
okay,
fine.
that's what the band told me.
Yeah,
so
you'll be fine. It's not a big deal.
Okay. All right.
So you were a recipient of a Jazz Road Tours grant. Can you tell us about the experience, perhaps the applying, about how it was that you won, what kind of effect it had on you and your career?
Yeah, well, for those of you who are timid about applying to things, which I feel like most people who make it to the call, you are kind of hopeful that you could get it. I applied twice. I didn't get it for the first time, and we're musicians. We try not to take things personally, but then of course, oh my God, I'm no good, hiding under the desk, and I'm never applying again. But one thing that I took advantage of and was extremely helpful was requesting feedback, which South Arts has kindly provided. And that guided me in very specific ways in terms of reshaping my application for the second time that I have applied. So the second time I have applied was actually just as the pandemic hit. The deadline was April 17, 2020. I was sitting on my hands, just like all of us, starting March 2020, and I decided, why not? And so, armed with this knowledge from the first cycle of applying, I have applied the second time, and I have made very significant changes. And for me personally, as a vocalist, and as a person who leads my own bands in some kind of very ground up built tours, I really took the guidelines to heart. And one thing that was important is to describe my project in a way that had artistic goals. Because, we go out there and we try to sell tickets like was discussed on this call today, and we're business people, etc. I didn't focus as much on the art of what I was trying to bring and on the concept of what I was trying to bring in the first cycle. In the second cycle, I really spelled it out, what my project was about and how it was important to me personally and how it would engage the audiences and potentially new audiences for jazz. So I feel like that was important. And number two, I really focused on bringing jazz to venues that were not commonly reachable or that could not afford to bring a band from New York. So a lot of my venues, my hosts, were either kind of like rundown off the beaten track performing arts centers that maybe had 2 shows in a year, and then otherwise maybe had a dance by a local dance studio and things like that. Or they may have been an art gallery or a synagogue, or things like that. I also made sure to build in an outreach concert with almost everyone, as much as I could, of my concerts, because again, I felt the spirit of the grant is about bringing music to audiences that don't necessarily have access to jazz. So a lot of our outreach activities were to places that could not afford to bring a jazz band, that don't have sometimes even a lot of music education, more underserved communities. Again, I felt that, I don't know, I was not part of the panel, but I took those ideas of Jazz Road bringing the music to communities that don't normally have access to it to heart. So I did not play in jazz clubs. I did not play in large community centers or performing arts centers or festivals. However, once I did receive the grant, and we did go on tour even during the pandemic, which was an adventure. And then I built other engagements to make the tour even longer. And so one thing I would tell you is, even in my first experience, just the process of applying for a grant have allowed me to build a relationship with presenters where they responded, trusted, gave me the show opportunity. So even when I didn't get the grant, I was able to do some of those shows on the restructured fee basis, because I was no longer supported. So that process was also kind of useful for my overall career development, even when I didn't get the grant. I taking band on the road, the same band, for an 8-9 day tour. It's wonderful because we really got to dig into the music. It allowed me to, further perfect ideas musically, but also business wise, and then apply it to creating a tour just like this one I'm on right now, where I'm going to schools and university master classes and clinics and concerts in smaller venues, community centers, pairing it up with larger venues. So, it just keeps pushing the needle further, keep creating new ideas for the next record that was kind of discussed, and connections. One of my shows was in New Orleans, and I have met an incredible arranger and trombone player in New Orleans, just hanging out on the scene when we were there for a concert in New Orleans Jazz Museum. And she became my music director for my big band. And so now it's a real thing. Now it's a project. Now I have, from just doing those big band gigs from time to time as a side person, now it's a thing, and I'm actually conceiving a big band record. And that was all in part due to South Arts Jazz Road grant.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. And I like what you mentioned about the fact of, using this to build a larger tour around it, right? So it doesn't have to be the complete tour. It's just that you're looking for a 3 to 6 venue tour to fund. But if you have 4, it's a great opportunity to build more in route, to build more around that, to use it to even create a bigger tour. Is there any other just advice that you would give to anybody out there who's thinking about applying or when they're filling out the application?
For me, I guess being very specific again and purposeful in terms of the venues you're choosing, really try to focus on places that don't normally have jazz, because even if you are playing at a gallery or at a church jazz vespers, those kind of gigs that normally pay a few $100s at most, one of my venues paid me $200, but it doesn't matter, because that's the whole point of this grant. It supplements the funding. So don't be afraid to really go out and create something very special. I have seen folks doing house concerts as part of this tour. Again, religious communities, art galleries, smaller art centers. I think it's really something that you have to, take advantage of. And some of the ways in which I was finding the venues was, when I felt like I have this 12-hour drive from one place to the next to drive to New Orleans. Okay, what's the town in between? And then I am of Jewish background, so I've Googled, synagogue or congregation in a town in between, and something came up, and I reached out and I said, we would like to have a show. We're supported by the grant. We do need you to participate in some way. But that allowed me to create a tour that, was routable. I literally print out the map of the United States, and I just, on Google Maps saw how would the drives actually add up, because I'm the driver, and I don't know, have fun with it, because again, I know it's hard, and, I'm applying for different grants every month, and it's so frustrating to get, 80% no's and maybe 20% yes, or maybe less, maybe just 1 out of 50 you apply for. And this particular grant allows you to build relationships with presenters. So even if you don't get it, you don't abandon those relationships. You can build further tours with those, if that's your interest.
Nice. Thank you so much, Svetlana. Appreciate you
Of
taking
course.
the time to come out.
Of course.
Enjoy your rehearsal and stay dry during this tropical storm
Yes,
hurricane.
I'll try, and hopefully we'll get home.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. You'll
Thank
be
you.
safe.
Good
Take
luck,
care.
guys. Good luck.
As mentioned at the beginning, I knew that the screen grabs of the application would be a little bit fuzzy, so hopefully my narration was somewhat clear. But I'm glad that Ivan was able to put the link, or that we were able to put the link to the actual application in the chat, so you can go over there and log in, create an account there, and just go ahead and take a look at it. You can save, but I want to go through some of these questions at the end here that I see in the Q&A. Someone mentioned that there's an assumption that jazz presentations are more prevalent in urban areas, yet many underserved areas in large urban areas also need jazz education and presentation. Do underserved urban communities also qualify for this tour grant opportunity? It's not an assumption. I mean, it is more prevalent in urban areas as opposed to rural areas or places that are suburban. There's definitely more of a prevalence of jazz in many urban areas, just as a whole, looking at the data. However, that being said, within a lot of these urban areas, there are plenty of spaces and communities that are underserved, which is why we said rural or underserved communities. So there's you will definitely continue to have a competitive application if you're visiting those spaces. Make sure that we understand when you make that application that you note that those, for example, if you're going to, you could be in Miami, which is very urban, but if Miami is huge, and there's big, large swaths of Miami that don't ever get to see jazz, that are out west, that are filled with youth who have been failed by the adults in their lives, and they would never have an opportunity to go to a jazz club or to see jazz. So if there's an opportunity to play in a space like that, where it is underserved, and that's definitely going to make your application competitive. So yes, rural is a term that we use a lot, which is a town that's under 50,000 people, and look into, especially as you get into sort of middle America. But if you're in an urban center and you know of spaces that don't have, where the youth or the community doesn't have access to jazz, doesn't get to see it, and that will definitely that's great. That's going to be there's going to be nice venues for your application. Is a grant primarily awarded to swing, modern, jazz groups? My music is this neoclassical and electronic music with visual components. No, it's not. It's not just swing, modern, jazz. So, yeah, your project sounds unique. Let's see. The first travel date event, the tour start date, the same? Yep, sure is. Does vocal pianist duo count as an ensemble? It sure does. Ensemble members can change from application to tour. What's the impact of that? So we'd like a note of it, if you can, just to let us know. But if the full demographic changes, for example, let's say it's a piano vocal bass, and the pianist can't make it. So whatever happens. You can't find another piano player, but this guitar player who is, has a skill and he can handle that harmonic responsibility. Just let us know. If the merit of the materials was quality enough, we may ask you for an updated video. But the merit of the video was of the materials was quality enough to be accepted for the grant. Assuming this happens after the grant is awarded, and that's fine. Now, if another situation somebody had asked me is if you have, for example, if you're Atlanta and then you're going to end up in Nashville and you want to have 4 other people are going to join you in Nashville, put those people under grant. You might put a sub item for guest. Those would be guest artists, and having guest artists, as long as the core is still there, would be fine. If it's a new group and you want to tour for the first time, we would still need to see video. You still need to have some collateral, some some media for the panel to be able to adjudicate. New groups are fine as long as there's something so that we can see said new group. Can we see examples of winning applications? No, we do not have those. We don't have access to those. We don't. Them can be very personal, so those aren't for sharing. Younger emerging artists never toured, created a tour before. Is Jazzro grant purely to fund tours that are already set up, or are there staff members programs available to help the groups applying to deal with logistics like setup for locations, venues, and travel? Well, that's a great question. Remember earlier we talked about the regional arts organizations, and you can find a list of those. You could actually just Google regional arts organizations, and a bunch of lists will pop up with the correct ones. But there's also one at the South Arts website. If you're looking at touring, I would, and looking at finding venues to tour, look to one of those regional arts organizations that are that serve one of the states or the area that you're in, and they have relationships with venues that they can put you into the right direction to help you put together venues that are amenable to and already understand and know what Jazz Road tours are about, or have worked with Jazz Road artists in the past. I know we have a list as well. So if you're in one of the southern states and you are saying, well, where do I go? Then reach out to us. Now, if you are a full-time student, Dylan, then you would not be eligible. Full-time students are not eligible for a Jazz Road Tours grant. So I don't know, when you say young, young's kind of subjective. So, we don't know, I can't tell there, but assuming that you're out of school and that you're working as a musician, then yeah, there are resources and help that's available to help you put together. And that's why we have the offer letter templates as well, which you don't have to go into the application to find. You can get it on the guidelines sheet, or on the resources and FAQ sheet rather, so that you can look at the questions that you need to ask some of these venues. Does a grant opportunity have matching income requirement? No, it does not, Dr. Lee. If we don't have previous tour experience, does it influence our chances of being awarded? No, as long as your application is sound, you put together a sound tour, and your work samples, your videos, your recordings are of a solid quality, then it will not. Can you still apply even if I haven't confirmed letters of interest in venues by December 1st? I would recommend, you would need some confirmed dates to be able to apply for the tour by December 1st. So, but you can just wait until January and apply for that one. Can a door deal be listed as equitable payment? Well, so equitable payment is the money you want to make. So usually we wouldn't list a door deal as equitable payment. That could be what the venue is offering as a door deal. So you can list that in one of two, in a few ways. You could just list that as a door deal. You can list what the ticket split is. So $1 ticket, you're making $5 a ticket. You could list it as the assumed amount you'd be making. You expect to sell 100 tickets at $5 a ticket, make $500, etc. But just make sure you make that note within that in the areas that are on the budget sheet. But that won't influence it. I don't want to waste anyone's time, but would this be applicable to a college jazz ensemble? It wouldn't. So full-time students are not eligible. I am sorry. Well, there's some killing college jazz ensembles. Could you let us know the state of the field based on last year? Well, the tour cycle is Myrna, if I completely understand your question, but the grant cycle is 4 years. There was COVID as well, so there was a lot of unique challenges to the last cycle. That team did a great job in building the foundation of which we now stand on and are looking forward to this next session. I do know that overall, though, for Jazz Road Tours over the next 4 years, it's about $1.5 million that we're looking to award to qualified applicants to be able to tour. The budget summary, actually, when you go through it, there is, like I said, there are templates that you can download. And if you download those templates, you can see the information that would be required for a budget summary. But if you still have questions after that, feel free to via email. Dr. Lee, depending on what you ask for, not everyone has been requesting 15,000. Some people have a smaller tour; they request 5 or 6. Some people request 8, 9. Some people request 10. The request will be, if they're awarded, their request will be granted for what they asked for. So if they requested 15 and they win, they're not going to say, "Well, here's 8," because that's what we got. It will be 15. Otherwise, it'll either be a yes or a no based on what they asked for. But at this point, this is the first cycle in the 4 years. So we're just getting started. So I wouldn't really be too concerned about budgetary restrictions at this point. Yeah. When we say the only real population size limit that would matter is rural areas less than 50,000 people. And that just makes the application competitive if you're helping us to achieve the goal of reaching out to some of those spaces. Newly created ensembles you just have to make sure you have work materials. So get some decent recordings. No, the tour. So does a grant cover tour that are partially in Canada? You wouldn't, if you were doing that and you had 3 dates in America, 2 dates in Canada, you would not apply for the dates that are in Canada. We would not fund the dates. This is to make sure that we would not fund any dates outside of the 50 states. So it's great if you have dates in Canada, but you wouldn't apply dates. You would be technically then applying for a partial tour support. So the 3 to 6 states would have to be within America, within the 50 states. Is it possible to have more than one tour cycle? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking. You can apply more than once as long as it's been a year since your last. If you won one time, you can apply as many times as you want. If you don't make it, you can apply the next site. You can continue to apply, but if you win one, then the next time that you'll be eligible to win one again would be to apply a year after the tour in which you. I hope that was clear. Audio is fine, but it really just depends on the panel. You are allowed to have audio. I would recommend video if you have some. It just helps the panel to get a better idea of what they're looking at, what they're hearing. We were turned down. Yeah, it's important, Jenny, to play in rural areas, but it's not crucial. I was not here to understand in the last cycle, so I have not seen your application, so I couldn't give you any ideas as to why. I can say that if you apply again, that we are going to do our best to give feedback to our declines so that they can have a more successful application next time. What that feedback will look like, we don't know yet. Really, a lot of it depends on manpower, what we're capable of doing in terms of, if we have 500 applicants and 20 get accepted, it makes it more difficult. So, but if we see like a pattern emerging through the applications that, well, wow, people aren't really understanding this, or they're not putting this, and this is kind of hampering the majority of people, we'll make sure that we either make whatever needed adjustments that we need to make on our side, or that we give feedback that says, hey, next time XYZ. But we're going to do our best to make sure that we can provide feedback for applications that don't make it, so that you can have more success the next time. I mean, the goal is for everyone to be at the quality where they'd be able to make it. Does it reward a specific style of jazz? No, it doesn't. A tour where you return home on free days is not allowed. That question was, do they need to be continuous, meaning a tour where you can return home on free days? No, the goal is to keep you is to be able to have you out on the road to build that tour camaraderie, that tour cohesion, chemistry is the word I'm looking for, and to be able to do that. I may have made money to be used. Oh yeah, definitely. When we say equitable payment, that's what we're talking about, musician pay. So yes, the grant money should absolutely be used to pay musicians. I'm just looking at another question. Okay, yeah. So if you have workshops, those would not be funded, but they do strengthen your application because they work in that town. Workshops are a great way. Sort of educational things you can do in a town are a great way to enhance your attendance at your show, especially if you do the workshop in the morning and then have the concert that night. Attendance is boosted by the participants and parents of that workshop. Let's see here. How about if it is a main venue in an urban area but agrees to offer tickets to underserved people for free? I mean, all these things are all great. All of those things are great. I love the way that you guys are thinking, Jamie. These are we want applicants to be thinking is how can they serve areas that are underserved. So yeah, we don't expect everyone to go out to rural insert state here, but if that's not a possibility, but you're thinking about ways to be able to serve underserved communities, that's still going to make your application more competitive. Can one apply for an individual grant as a leader and tour grant as an ensemble? You can be a part of a grant if you're applying as a leader and you're the piano player and it's the Carson Piano Trio. You can apply as a leader, and then if someone else is applying and you're in the band, that's okay, but you cannot apply for multiple ensembles. Agent for jazz artists, how do I prioritize which one to apply for? We do have agents who apply for jazz artists. That's really going to kind of be up to you, how you feel, how successful you feel, in terms of how you want to structure the application for each one of those. It's going to just have a lot to do with how you want to do it. I would prioritize ones who are, honestly, I don't know. When you look at it and you look at what we're trying to accomplish, and you look at the jazz artists that might be able to accomplish that, but you can apply for all of them, but you would apply as the person who's the leader. And that's what you would do. So you wouldn't apply with your name on each one, because if you apply with your name on each one, it would be technically the same person applying for each one with different ensembles. So you would, if you're applying for artists, you would apply for them on their behalf. How do you define jazz? Yeah, so poetry is fine as long as the main component is music. As long as the main component is based and rooted in the Black American experience, the component is improvisatory by nature and has the core tenets of jazz, whether that takes the form of neo-soul jazz, has poetry, has tap dance, which is sonic in nature. Those things are all jazz. We're not the jazz police here. If you define your music as having jazz, now, if it's, there could be some things, I suppose, but I mean, again, if you define your music as being, now if you're very, 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 very far fringe, way more in the line of hip hop or soul, and barely touch the improvisatory nature or barely touch some of that area, then it might make it less competitive if there's a lot of more obvious jazz acts that are applying. But we're not the jazz police. So, our goal is to fund programs and projects that do the best to advance the jazz field. So just keep that in mind. So if it's advancing the gospel field more than it's advancing the jazz field, something you need to really be introspective about and look into, and see if you're meeting both the goals of your ensemble as well as the goals of the organization as well. As a presenter, do you have a list of ensembles, such an ensemble like the CMA? I'll have to get back to you. If you could do me a favor, Joseph, shoot me an email at South. I can look into that and get back to you with a solid answer on that one. Does the ensemble size affect the possibility of getting funded? No, we do fund up to 10 pieces, so 10 is fine. Again, we go back to tour integrity. 10 artists on the road for 6 shows over 11 days may run out of money pretty quick. So now, this is an opportunity where you make 15, but in your offer letter say that each venue is offering you $3-4 grand, then that allows for tour integrity. So it just makes it a slightly more challenging tour. Yeah, but 10 is fine. Established venue. Right. So there's a couple things to think about. Anonymous attendee, guy, girl, person. A couple things to think about when it comes to that. Like, it's great to have venues. We want you to build your career. So obviously building your career is also going to be, if you can play at a Blues Alley or a Lincoln, Dizzy's at Lincoln Center or something to that nature, it's going to boost your career. So we're not excluding those venues. What we're saying is that a grant during whatever cycle could be more competitive if those aspects are there. Now, I cannot speak for what happened in the last iteration. Again, there was COVID. There was a lot of things that were different. There was a lot of different motivations to making sure that we were trying to get as many musicians and artists as we could on their feet and moving. We were trying to sort of kickstart the sort of musician economy, so to speak. But I was not here, so I cannot speak to that. I do know that it was we were just trying to really support as many musicians as we could as an organization. Coming out of that terrible pandemic and what that did to us as artists. But yes, it will be more competitive if it does have those things. I wanted to ask if I could apply for being a O1 artist as a visa holder. Been living and playing in New York, but I'm on an O1 visa. Berta, if you can shoot me an email, dtucker@southarts.org. I can give you a more answer. I don't want to speak to that as that's a question I haven't encountered yet. So I want to make sure that I do my due diligence before answering. Is it mandatory to use the same musicians on the tour? Can you work with local musicians? Again, note that in your tour summary and in your anything else that we need to know about, so that we can, and in your budget, definitely in your expenses. In some cases that could be valuable. Hopefully you at least know those musicians. But if you want to talk about that more, again, reach out to me. So when you reach out to me, if you have questions that you would like me to answer, and have a conversation, I will. When you reach out, I'll send you some calendar dates that you can book some time to have a one-on-one and kind of have. But I do know how that is. There's a few times when I've toured with a core of me and a bass player. Actually, we've hired a piano player and a drummer in each city. Sometimes that cuts down expenses, but it would have to be on a case by case, and we'd have to see if that's something that could be viable based on how you describe it, explain it, and justify it. Ronald asks if you're asking prices, the grant be used for just road and expenses to subsidize the other costs. However you choose to structure it is up to you. But again, we're hoping that you ask for equitable pay that you think you deserve based on your years in the business and how much work you did to put this tour together. Other costs for the different venues. What does the tour have to be and does the tour have to be all inclusive, or can it be, say, 3 to 5 one-nighters within 4 to 6 weeks? So the goal is to keep you out on the road. So one-nighters is not what the goal is for. The grant rather is for. So 3 to 5 one-nighters in 6 weeks would not qualify for a tour. A tour would be contiguous dates with only a few days in between max in order to compensate for slow nights or travel days. How many grants will be awarded per grant cycle? We don't have a definitive number. We have a budget, and if everyone writes in and asks for $5,000, there'll be more tours awarded per grant cycle. And ask for $15,000, there's potential to be less tours per grant cycle. So that is, I can't really answer that one. A U.S. citizen artist living overseas at the moment of the grant cycle with a band based in the U.S. and confirmed dates could be eligible to apply. If they're a U.S. citizen, they can apply. And the tours in America. 10-member limit for the ensemble, yes, but not for the Jazz Road residencies, which is a different project. But for the tours, yes, 10-member limit. Again, tour integrity is really important, so it's going to be really challenging to get 3 to 6 dates with more than 10 people. It's better to sign up as an individual, Glenn, but if you, again, want to reach out, I could do a little more due diligence on that and see what the ramifications might be. But these grants are to fund individual artists, individual centric. So it would be better for you to sign up as an individual. Ivan, or does anybody know about dates in Puerto Rico being a U.S. territory?
Yes, we do support all U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Guam, etc.
Awesome. So there you go. Can we adjust the material repertoire according to the individual venue demographic? Absolutely. We recommend it. So if you're playing a certain place that wants you to be more straight ahead, so you want to leave out some of that, some of those reimagined pop songs, then that's probably in your best interest to continue to support that. And maybe you change the set list for the next venue. Absolutely. Those things are, Joseph, now, is there a space where they can find, Ivan, the potential venues on the website? I don't believe so, right? But we can help them identify some.
So there are 2 places I would recommend looking on our website. If you're on the main Jazz Road Tours page, you will see both there's a resources and FAQ section where we do have what Drew and I affectionately refer to as our list of lists, which are some really great resources that can help you identify tours in specific areas and potential venues. And then also on the Jazz Road Tours page, we have a link to who have we funded in the past, which will take you to an interactive map where you can go back through the past few years and see where tours have been. So between those two resources, our resources page, as well as the interactive map, we do hope that we can provide you some guidance in what might be some viable locations.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ivan. Is it okay to have audio from one ensemble and video from another? I mean, you don't having it. Yes, I suppose so. It doesn't have to. Also, it doesn't have to be a live show. It could be a music video. That's fine. It's not. You're not auditioning for a all-state jazz band, so we don't need a singular, continuous cut of music. You can it could be a music video. It could be audio samples from your album. And Monique, as long as the band and the music is very prevalent throughout the show, it could be considered jazz. If there's its improvisatory nature, essentially, we consider the poet as poet with the ensemble as a singer who just happens to sing with less notes. Essentially, I mean, is not a vocalist just a poet with tones? So as long as it's not just spoken word the entire.
Our apologies, everyone. I know that there's some audio technical difficulties right now. We're working on getting that back up as soon as possible. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your patience, everybody. While we work on the audio and video technical difficulties, we will get this back up as soon as possible. We appreciate your patience. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, everybody. We are working on getting Drew back as quickly as possible, and we will resume the question and answer portion as soon as he is back. Okay, it looks like Drew is on his way back in. Thank you all so much for your patience. Great.
Apologies for that. Unsure of what happened there. So back to these lovely. So I think I lost most of those Q&As at this point.
Sure. So the next question is from Alan. I received a grant to tour in June of this year. If my tour begins in July 2023, am I eligible to apply again?
Yeah. So you'd apply for the grant cycle that is after that your tour ends. So the grant cycle you apply for would be after the tour ends, not the tour cycle, but the grant cycle you apply for would be a year after the tour ends. So that it would start in July or whichever one that is at this point.
The next question is, how long does a tour have to last?
It should be 3 dates to 6 dates. Minimum 3, maximum 6.
We have another question. As far as drawing audiences in rural areas, how much is that the responsibility of the artist and how much is it for the venue?
That's between you and the venue. That's up to you. I mean, as any artist would, you do the best you can using the tools you have. But obviously, the understanding is that hopefully the venue understands and you guys work together in those things.
Great. And this is a similar question to one you answered earlier, but a person is asking how many grants you expect to give out per cycle next year and how many applications do we receive on average? They're asking about our average acceptance rate.
So again, we're coming out of the pandemic, so things were a little bit different. The grants were rolling at the last time, so we're building that data now. But again, our goal is to give out to fund jazz artists. That's we want to, and to an extent have to give out this money. So we were trying to find as many qualified applicants and qualified applications that we can do that for. So, but as we continue to go through this, we'll be able to build more of that data. But it's hard. I can't give you an exact number on that right now.
Another person is asking essentially if there's an average going rate for musicians these days. They know what they pay, but they're curious about what others would work for. Essentially, if there's a standard scale.
No, there's no standard scale. A lot of it's just going to be really based on what it costs you. And so one of the reasons why we have the budget sheet is so it can ask you real questions about what the expenses are, what the costs are. One of the sheets also has in there, what are your opportunity costs? What costs are you giving up by going on tour? And those things should be factored in too. So the goal is to help you to come up with an idea of equitable payment. So even if outside of a Jazz Road grant, you're not getting paid that now, you know where you should be at. You know the numbers you need to be at, what you're working toward over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, what you need to be making a successful living, taking care of all of your responsibilities financially by being a touring jazz artist. So, but there's no going rate, depending on where you are. And if you're in Nashville, they work a lot of times. If you're working on Broadway in Nashville, you're making tips. If you're working other places, there's usually standards that go by those places. I know in Miami a lot, there's hard $400 evenings. They don't pay more than that ever, no matter how many people you bring in. And at some venues or concert venues, maybe a ticket split. So really what we want you to know is what's equitable for you, what you need to make, and to be able to ask for that number. So that's why we put those budget sheets in there.
Great. Can grant funds be applied to rehearsals?
Yeah. Just justify it in the expense justification. But yeah, obviously it would depend. So I say that with the caveat of if you're asking for show level money in a rehearsal, the panel is going to look at it, and all the panel is not just, it's not, just so you know, also the panel is made up of musicians, PhDs, jazz artists. Some have large names, some large name jazz artists. So they understand what they're looking at. So if you we're paying $500 a head for a rehearsal, you might get a couple side eyes. There's not a lot of justification for that, but rehearsals do factor in, especially if you're on the road, or however you choose to break it down is up to you. How you justify those expenses is up to you. Any others, Ivan?
Yes. Can a grant be applied for if the proposed dates are not yet solidified?
No. You can apply for them, but you would need to have at least a yes on the window of dates within that window, that tour window. So they could say like, hey, we could either do Wednesday or Thursday. We'll have to get back to you. That's one thing. But if you don't have any sort of confirmation at all, then no. You'd wait till the next grant cycle. That's why they're so close. They're only a month and 6 weeks apart from the end of one to the start of the next.
Great. Next person has 2 tours within the timeframe listed for the current application. Can they apply and put all the dates on the application for both tour timeframes? Example, they're doing 2-week tours in the Midwest in March and 2 weeks in the South in May.
You'd apply for one of those tours.
Is including corporate support acceptable? For example, an airline or hotel sponsor?
Yeah, it's great to know. Again, that's going to help us with the field, but it won't have much bearing on the application quality. I mean, we should think, yes, include it, but it's not going to have any bearing per se on the application itself in terms of how it's adjudicated. Because again, it's important that we want to know we're not subtracting that. We're not taking that data of support, corporate support, in kind or venue contributions, and looking at what you're asking for and saying, well, why are they asking for this when they're paying this? That's just so we know the field. We want to know what you need to tour to get from home and back home after you perform the 3 to 6 dates, as if the venues or you were getting no support. And that's the number you should be asking for. All of the other information is important because we need to know about the field. So if you don't include that information, you're likely not to be as competitive because your tour isn't going to help us to understand how we can further reach our goals. So make sure you do include that information, but don't worry about that. Like if all of your venues are paying you, obviously this is exorbitant, maybe, actually maybe not, but if all of your venues are paying you 10 grand a piece, first of all, you're not going to rural areas, but if they're all paying you 10 grand a piece, and it's going to cost you 13 grand a tour, then good, you made an extra X dollars over the 13 grand. Right, we want jazz musicians to be able to make money on this tour, so we're not asking to be like, well, if those venues are paying them the 30 grand. Why are they asking us for 15? That's not the motive behind this grant. So we may call you with additional questions on how you got every venue to pay you 10 grand, though.
Great.
But no, it won't affect anything.
You already addressed that the lead applicant has to be from the U.S., but can non-U.S. citizens be included in the band?
It would make your application based on who the funds are dedicated to serve. It could have the potential of making your application less competitive, as the application has very specific goals here within within the 50 states.
The next question is stating that a lot of their live video doesn't necessarily feature the same players with whom they might want to travel. They're a vocalist and a composer. If they know that the personnel that they're traveling with is different, is that okay?
Yeah, so if you, as long as the video is representative of what you're taking out, so if the instrumentation is the same, if the personnel's different on the video, don't put that personnel when you list your personnel demographics and your personnel information. So if John and Joe are playing piano and drums in the video, but Jamie and Stephanie are playing it on tour, you'd put Jamie and Stephanie as your ensemble personnel. But in the video, if it has John and Joe, that's fine, as long as it's representative of the music you're putting out there.
Can one apply for 10 musicians, but also invite an 11th local guest?
Yeah, again, you would listen, who you have sitting in with you in wherever you go is up to you. We want to know about the core group and who you apply for. Who you apply for cannot be more than 10.
The next person has extensive touring experience, but not as a leader of a jazz ensemble themselves. Does tour experience with other groups, other jazz groups, considered viable touring experience?
Absolutely.
Can the performances be located within the same state?
As long as there's at least one performance that's 250 miles from where you live.
The next person is asking if we will be updating the FAQ on our website based on what's been discussed today.
Yes. Do we have a printout? We have a printout of the Q&As?
We should be able to get those afterwards. If not, we can pull them from the recording.
Yes.
There's another question about what is equitable pay ranges for jazz artists today.
It's really what's equitable payment for you. I mean, what's equitable for me at my age, with what gets me on the road is different than what will get a 24-year-old living at home on the road. So it's hard we're not trying to we're not trying to be the police here when it comes to those types of things. So if somebody who has extensive touring experience that is like, man, I'm not getting out of bed for less than $1,500 in my pocket per show, that's well within your right to determine your value, because you know that if you leave, you're leaving behind $1,000 in lessons for the week. You're leaving behind your teaching gig. You're leaving behind, whatever else is going on. So that's going to be different than someone who's like, man, I need to get out there. $500 a show would be great for me. I'm living at home right now while I'm hustling and doing those and trying to make my name and trying to get out there. So it's going to be different. Equitable pay is going to be different. There's really not a standard. It's really it's going to be based on your experience and where you are in your life as well, and how much, and also how much work you're putting into doing what needs to be done. So that's going to be very individual in that aspect.
This next question is, would 5 one-nighters within 8 to 10 days be considered a tour?
It depends on how it's structured, but if it's something, again, we go back to tour integrity, right? So if you're 4 days without a show, then that's 4 days of eating out, that's 4 days of hotels, that's 4 days of staying somewhere, and is that you kind of lose ground in the tour integrity aspect of it. So you can apply with it, but when the panel does look at the integrity of the tour, that's going to be something that's considered.
This next person is asking if a permanent resident with a green card is included in the citizenship eligibility requirement.
Give me an email and I'll look into that and get back to you.
This next person plays a fusion of blues, reggae, and other forms with their own jazz blues spin. For example, they did a cover of Elton John's Tiny Dancer with an extended jazz improv at the end. Would this still be included under the umbrella of jazz?
If you consider it jazz and it meets sort of that criteria that we spoke about earlier, then apply. Sounds pretty, again, would that music, it's a question you can ask yourself is, would that music be, better played at Cali Fest, alongside Dirty Heads and other groups, or would it be better played at, New Orleans Jazz Fest? Well, not that there's that much jazz at New Orleans Jazz Fest, but would it be better played at, New Orleans Jazz Fest alongside Wynton Marsalis and, Robert Glasper, for example? And that's a question you have to answer. And again, we're not the jazz police.
Okay, we are coming towards the end. We only have 5 more questions left. But how many days can the tour last? This one questioner has done a solid month previously.
Yeah, I mean, you can only apply for 3 to 6 dates. It could be a part of a tour. So if you have a solid month on the road, you can pick 3 to 6 of those dates as long as they're contiguous to apply for. But 3 to 6 dates, contiguous dates are what you'd apply for.
This next question is a process question, but how can they accept a low-paying tour date before they know they will have a grant? Do they have to take gigs that are dependent upon receiving the grant?
So one of the things we are working on are a few email templates. So a lot of times what I've in talking to people who have won and who have successfully built the tour from this, what they said was they would write and say that they were applying for the South Arts Tour grant. They would give the phone number of myself or the South Arts Maine, and they would mention what they were applying for, and they would lead like that and say that obviously it would be contingent on that, and they would build a relationship with the venue. So yeah, and then if they didn't get the grant, like Svetlana was saying, when the first time she didn't get the grant, and she still went back and said, "Hey, I didn't get the grant, but I'd love to still play there. Let's rework this number. What can you do?" And then she said that, and I know that I don't know if she said it when she was just here, I don't recall, but in our conversation, she did say that maybe they offered $750 with the grant, and then when she came back and said they didn't get the grant, they said they could go up as high as they said they did $750 plus a door deal, or maybe they went as high as $1,000. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know that they were equitable, and she built a relationship with that venue anyway. So the exercise of going through this and getting that, and then if you don't get the grant, to go back and say, "Hey, I'd love to still do this tour." She still did the tour that she had planned on anyway, but just with reworked numbers with the venue. So yeah, I would write and say that this is what's up and that you're looking to get the grant. And if you don't get the grant, you'll call back and then you can renegotiate. But just by doing that, you still build that relationship with the venue that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And it's a great in to start building relationships with the venues that you might not have been able to connect with before.
This next question is, if you are acting as a multiple venue provider for a band that you lead and perform with, would they in effect be providing to you their own gig confirmation? It sounds like they are a presenter as well as a performer.
Yeah, you would. Again, the offer letter doesn't need a notarized signature. We just need to make sure you have that information and confirmation that the gig is happening and that you've asked the right questions so that we can understand the integrity of your tour.
You mentioned being compensated for managing the tour, securing the venues, etc. Is this frowned upon if that person is also the leader of the ensemble? Should they pay
No.
themselves twice in the budget?
Yes, but I wouldn't list that it was twice in the budget. I would just list that service. So there's two ways that you can go about that. There is tour. Well, yes, you would list that as a cost. So management X, whatever the other thing is, booking agent X. These things are real costs. Now, if that person's the same person as band leader, I mean, I don't think that doesn't need to be mentioned. That, well, this is also the same person. It's just a fee structure in terms of your expenses. Now, if you're talking about something like photography on tour, a tour manager, someone who's coming out there, someone who's a non-musical contributor but is going to be on the road with you, we do offer, that's not permitted unless we do offer up to $2,500 in tour support. That's tour management, any non-musical personnel that's going to be on the road with you doing an essential service for your ensemble. We offer up to $2,500 for that, as long as the total grant number doesn't go over 15,000. Sorry. So if you have 12,500 is your ask, then you could ask for up to 2,500 in tour support for tour management, for photographer, videographer, social media person, etc. So, but you can't do that in the 15,000. So that isn't supported. You can't have $14,000 in or $15,000 in. Well, anyhow, $12,500 you can ask for, and if your ask doesn't go over that, then you can ask for up to $2,500 in tour support, non-musical essential personnel. Sorry.
There was a follow-up asking if a publicist would be included within the budget as well.
Yeah, you just include that in your budget expense budget.
Great. And the last question is, how does South Arts use the data you compile from these grants to create positive change for jazz artists? For example, helping to change the way venues compensate artists or helping alternative venues create additional platforms for jazz?
All of that. We try to do all of that. The hows, the mechanics of how we're going to use this data, we're going to figure out internally. We're going to talk to our team, and we're going to make the needed moves. So, but we want to gather that data in a non-pandemic situation so that we can really see what the actual situation looks like. So, but that's a great question, and we are developing the answers as we speak. And yeah, so that was the final question. We appreciate you guys coming out. Ivan, did I miss anything? Kathy, did I miss anything?
I think we are clear. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. We still have quite a few people in the room who hung with us for over an hour and a half. So thank you all.
Yep. Thank you guys very much. And again, my email is dtucker@southarts.org. You can reach out, and what I'll do again, if you please go through the guidelines, please go through the Q&As. We'll be updating them over the next week. I have a Q&A video as well that we'll put up there as well that I'm going to keep adding to. That's going to list those things, but please read those things. And then if you have questions, send an email. And what I'll do is I'll send you back a couple of times so that we can schedule a one-on-one. So if you do call and I'm unable to get back to you, the phone has been ringing quite a lot, and there's a lot going on. So it's really exciting. It's exciting to see this. It's exciting that this exists for jazz artists. And we really hope that just by the mere act of applying for this, that you're going to be able to enhance your career, enhance your perspective, hopefully improve your value and your perspective on yourself and what you're worth, so that you can go out and do this. The goal again is to enhance the jazz field, and this grant does that by helping the individual artists. Thank you again for your support. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching if you're watching on the review, and we'll see you guys again soon.